This is a story that takes place in Japan. It is a story about a boy named Ito and his kite. Of all the toys Ito had, the kite was his favorite. He loved to run and feel the kite string tug at his hand as the wind lifted the kite high above him. Then he would pretend that the kite was alive and that it could see the land below. It could see the flooded rice fields that Ito's family farmed, the farm village where Ito lived, and Ito's school and playground. The kite could see the hills and mountains, and beyond them the sea that is all around Japan. And sometimes, high above the kite, great airplanes would come roaring through the air from distant lands far across the sea. Ito hoped he would be able to see those faraway lands someday, but he'd never even traveled far from home. That evening at dinner, while Ito ate his rice and fish and vegetables, his family talked about many things. Ito's sister Yuki talked about a holiday that was coming soon, the Children's Festival. All the children of Japan love that holiday. Ito's aunt talked about a trip she was going to make to the city on the day before the Children's Festival. Ito wished he could go too, because he'd never been to the city. And then his father said that Ito could go, and that he would give him some money so he could buy something for himself. Ito could hardly wait for the day to come. So on the day before the Children's Festival, Ito and his aunt said goodbye to his mother and left on their trip to the city. They would go by train. They walked on the path along the edge of the rice fields. The fields were covered with water to help the growth of the young rice plants. Ito saw many other familiar sights as they walked along. He saw on the steep hillsides tea bushes that were being tended. The leaves of these bushes are used for making tea. Also on the hillsides are mulberry bushes, whose leaves are used in another way. The leaves are fed to silkworms. From the cocoons of silkworms, silk is made. Ito and his aunt passed over an old bridge that crossed a peaceful stream. Then their trip to the train station took them along the ocean. They could see some fishing boats in the water and others being pushed ashore by fishermen. Ito enjoyed watching the fishermen, but he and his aunt had a train to catch. At the train station, Ito and his aunt waited with other people for the train. Was Ito a little sad? Perhaps, because he hadn't been able to take his kite along. He'd wanted his kite to see the city too. But Ito was too excited to feel sad for long. Now the train was in the station. It was an electric train. The most exciting part of the trip would soon begin. The motorman waited for everyone to get aboard. At the conductor's signal, the train started on its way to the city, carrying Ito and his aunt. As the train sped along, there were many wonderful sights that Ito saw. He saw great factories far away with high chimneys, and some factories closer by. Where the train traveled along the ocean, he saw ships from all parts of the world that carried cargoes to and from Japan. And then, far ahead, Ito could see the first buildings of the city. The city was just as wonderful as Ito had imagined. There were so many things to see, so many people, There were people wearing modern clothes and people wearing old-fashioned clothes. And so many cars and trucks and buses and buildings. The city was much bigger and busier than Ito's little village. Just ahead was the store where Ito's aunt wanted to do her shopping. When Ito looked into the store window, he saw something that made him smile. It was just a ball of string, but Ito was going to buy it. Now he knew how he could share his wonderful trip with his kite. The next day was the Children's Festival. Banners were flying outside Ito's house, and inside, Ito's collection of dolls and other special things had been put up, and he was showing it off to his sister, Yuki. Some of the dolls were of famous warriors. Most boys in Japan have collections like this that are put out on the Children's Festival. The collections help boys remember that they must be brave, good workers, and good citizens. Later that morning, Yuki went out with Ito. She was going to visit friends in the village to see their collections. Ito would do that later, but there was something else he wanted to do first. Outside, they saw the banners their father had put up. On the day of the Children's Festival, banners like these fly all over Japan in honor of the boys. Ito was pleased to see a banner flying for him. Yuki met a friend and they stopped to talk. But Ito had something more important to do. Ito ran along the road now as fast as he could. The wind took hold of his kite and it began to soar up and up into the air. Soon it had gone as high as it could, and Ito was holding the end of the kite string. But what was he doing now? He was tying the end of the string to the new ball of string he had bought in the city. Now the kite could fly higher than it had ever flown before. High enough to see far beyond the farm and village where Ito lived. High enough to see perhaps all the way to the wonderful city. Now, Ito thought, perhaps his kite could see many of the sights he had seen on his visit to the city the day before. When all of the new ball of string had unwound, the kite looked very tiny against the sky. Ito was pleased. Then, high above the kite, he saw a great airplane flying across the sea to other parts of the world. Just then, the wind began to grow stronger, and the kite pulled harder on the string. Ito held tight, but suddenly, the string slipped out of his hands. The kite was going higher and higher and farther away. How sad Ito felt. He had lost his kite. But then, he began to think. The new string had let the kite fly high enough to see the wonderful city. Perhaps now that the kite was free, it would be able to fly high enough and far enough to see the world. If that were so, then Ito didn't mind losing his kite. Perhaps someday, like his kite, Ito, too, would be able to see the world.